In a galaxy ruled by pride and ancient codes of honor, humans are seen as weak because they avoid war. But when a powerful alien dominion accuses a human colony of rebellion and sends a massive fleet to crush it, the humans respond with quiet strength and ruthless strategy. A veteran commander, tired and wise, leads humanity's defense, not with reckless violence, but with calculated, devastating tactics. As the enemy presses forward, the humans reveal a terrifying truth: they avoid war because they know the true cost of it, and how to end it utterly. This story explores the clash of ideologies, the horrors of war, and the power of survival through pragmatism, not honor. The stakes are nothing less than the survival of entire worlds and the shattering of ancient beliefs. The great hall of the AAS conclave was cold and silent. Towering holograms of alien leaders stood like statues, their faces locked in grim lines. At the center, a giant avatar of Overlord Boros, a Telkine warlord, loomed like a shadow made of sharp obsidian. His voice rumbled like mountains grinding together as he spoke, accusing the humans of Heracles' 9 colony of piracy, aggression, and cowardice. "You glorify strategic retreat and call it wisdom," Boros thundered. "You are unworthy of honor. Your time of hiding behind treaties is over." The room held its breath. The accusations were false, known lies. But no one doubted the truth behind the threat. The Telkine's 7th Fleet, 50 warships strong, was already blazing toward Heracles' 9 to crush the humans. Amid the alien avatars stood the human representative, Ambassador Kian Kuran. His avatar was simple, plain gray suit, weary face, nothing like the towering obsidian giant. For 10 long seconds, he said nothing. Then, without a word, his avatar vanished, leaving the conclave in a tense silence. The human's message was clear: the talking was done. On the command deck of the Terran diplomatic cruiser, Indomitable, the real Ken Corrin stared at the star map. The red blips of the incoming Telkine fleet moved steadily toward a stubborn blue dot, Heracles 9. His hands clenched at his side, a habit from a lifetime of battles long past. He remembered the weight of command, the smell of burning cities, and the cold voice that once said, "God have mercy on us all." "We've crossed the perimeter, sir," Lieutenant Serena said, her voice sharp and steady. "Full battle array, no surprises." Corrin's eyes narrowed. "They're predictable. That's their greatest strength, and their greatest weakness." Heracles 9 was a mining colony, harsh and dusty, bathed in the harsh light of twin suns. But beneath its industrial facade, a secret weapon waited. Mila Fun, the colony's lead geologist and tactical mind, stood on a windswept mesa, watching the sky glow with the approach of the Telkine warships. For 15 years, Mila had hidden a terrible truth. The massive mining machines and power stations were not just for industry. They could be turned into weapons of planet-shaking power. At Corrin's command, she prepared to transform the colony into a fortress unlike any other. "Phase 1, go," Mila said into her comlink. Across the planet, the deep hum of the mining colony died away. Orbital rail guns stopped firing cargo pods. Giant exhaust funnels pivoted, focusing superheated plasma into deadly streams. The ground itself began to tremble as the hidden seismic pulverizers activated, tuned to break apart entire canyon walls. The first wave of Telkine shock troops landed in a deep canyon called the Funnel. They moved with disciplined precision, expecting to crush an unprepared militia. Instead, the ground beneath them roared to life. Massive rock formations, weighing thousands of tons, began to collapse. The soldiers froze as the canyon walls cracked and fell, burying hundreds alive in seconds. The earth swallowed vehicles and troops alike in a brutal, geological slaughter. Mila stood on her mesa, watching the devastation on her tactical display. The Telkine soldiers had walked straight into a trap no one could have imagined. Back in the conclave chamber, Kian Kuran's avatar reappeared. The assembled species gasped as live feeds showed the carnage. Overlord Boros's fury shattered the chamber decorum. "This is not warfare." Boros roared. "This is barbarism." Quran's voice cut through the chaos, calm but deadly. Honor is a luxury. Survival is a necessity. You call our tactics cowardice while you bomb civilians. You have brought this fight upon yourselves. Watch and learn what happens when immovable ideology meets unstoppable pragmatism. Meanwhile, a small squadron of human ships, disguised as miners and freighters, launched precise attacks on Telkine supply lines. They struck at unarmed logistics ships, sowing chaos in the enemy's network. The Telkine fleet scrambled in confusion, unable to catch the elusive ghosts. On the iron resolve, Boros slammed his fist on the console, rage burning in his eyes. They refuse to stand and fight with honor, he growled. We will crush this rock into dust. But his second-in-command warned of the fleet's growing supply problems. Boros's stubborn pride pushed him to reckless choices. In the conclave, all watched as Boros's heavy warships left their guard positions, chasing phantoms while exposing their vital jump lane to attack. Kian Quran watched, a cold fire lighting his gaze. The humans were prepared for this. When the colony defense fleet struck the jump lane relay, the delicate ring that allowed faster-than-light travel collapsed in a brilliant flash. The entire Telkine fleet was trapped, a million light-years from home, with dwindling supplies and no way out. The galaxy gasped. The humans were no longer the weak pacifists they were thought to be. They were a force that ended wars quickly, efficiently, and without mercy for illusions of honor. On the Iron Resolve's bridge, Boros's face twisted from fury to dread. His officers looked at him with disbelief and pity. His command had become a threat to his own people. Broken, Boros whispered the order, disengage the bombardment. Stand down. On the planet below, a Telkine soldier named Brev sat among the wounded, confused by the humans' care for their enemies. The warm bowl of food offered to him was a weapon unlike any he had known. The war was not over. The battle for survival had only just begun. The dust from the shattered canyon still hung in the air, drifting like silent ghosts over Heracles 9. Mila Fun stood on her mesa, her weathered face hard as the planet beneath her boots. The ground had just swallowed a whole division of Telkine troops, but the war was far from over. The enemy was desperate now, and desperation made commanders reckless. Back on the Indomitable, Ambassador Kian Quran watched the shifting battle on the tactical displays. The Telkine fleet was fractured, their communication in chaos. The heavy battleships, the Vengeance and the Unflinching, had broken from formation, chasing after the phantom strikes that kept their supply lines in shambles. Korin's voice was quiet but firm. They're overextending. Their pride blinds them. Lieutenant Serena nodded. They're playing right into our hands. Quran's eyes lingered on the strategic map showing the delicate ring of the jump lane relay. The colony defense fleet, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, had struck it with overwhelming firepower. The relay had exploded, collapsing the space-time corridor that was the Telkine's only way home. No retreat, Quran whispered. They're trapped. On the Iron Resolve, Boros's fury had turned to bitter fear. His officers' faces showed a growing realization, their proud leader's rash decisions had sealed their fate. Sub-Commander Rex's hand hovered over his sidearm, a silent signal of mutiny. The honor-bound code was cracking, shattered by the cold truth of survival. The great warlord, once a mountain of pride, now looked smaller, broken beneath the weight of his failure. On Heracles 9's surface, the colony was a strange mix of industry and war. Towering ore processors and mining rigs had been turned into weapons of mass destruction, but it was not brute force alone that defined the human defense. It was cunning, patience, and a cold understanding of the price of war. Mila Fun's comlink crackled. All stations report ready, came the voice of Deke, her second-in-command, his face marked by the scars of many battles. Trigger Phase 2, Mila ordered, her voice steady. Across the continent, the massive atmospheric condensers powered up, their cooling towers now emitting charged plasma jets instead of harmless steam. These machines, once used to regulate the colony's harsh environment, were now weapons of devastating precision. The air itself became a weapon. The Telkine orbital platforms, seeing the humans disorganized, began bombarding the colony's population centers. The bright flares of the enemy bombardment lit the darkening sky. But Mila had anticipated this. "Recalibrate the condensers," she commanded. "Focus on clearing the dust clouds in 30 minutes. It's our only chance." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Quran's avatar reappeared in the AAS conclave. This time, his voice was clear and cold as steel. "You claim we avoid war," he said, addressing the alien delegates. "That is true. We avoid it because we understand what it costs. We have ledgers, detailed accounts of every life lost, every city burned, every dream shattered. We do not fight because we are weak. We fight because we must survive." The image of the vaporized Telkine kinetic slug burned across the screens, a brutal demonstration of human power. The assembly fell silent, confronted with the reality they had ignored for too long. Meanwhile, the small squadron of human, ghost ships, continued their deadly dance. Piloted by experts like Sparrow, these ships struck at the enemy supply tenders and communication relays, never staying in one place long enough to be caught. Sparrow's voice was calm as she initiated another micro-jump. "Payloads away. Target neutralized." The explosions were small but strategically vital. Each lost fuel tender and damaged relay tightened the noose around the Telkine fleet. Boros, desperate and enraged, shouted orders to his fleet to hunt down the elusive attackers. But the humans were ghosts, slipping through the shadows of space with impossible speed. On the surface, the Telkine shock troops who survived the canyon collapse were regrouping, shaken but not defeated. Their commanders ordered them forward, but their confidence was broken. The brutal geological assault was unlike anything they had faced, no blaster fire, no explosions, just the cold, crushing weight of the planet itself fighting back. In a makeshift aid station, Sub-Lieutenant Brev watched as human medics cared for wounded Telkine soldiers. The act of mercy was confusing and disarming. "Why?" he asked one medic quietly. She looked at him without judgment. "Because you were hungry," she said simply. It was a weapon he could not understand, a weapon of compassion that struck deeper than any pulse rifle. Back on the Indomitable, Quran studied the recent communications intercepts. He ordered Velis to bring up the military archives of House Korith, the family of Overlord Boros. "Their shame is our advantage," he said quietly. His grandfather was exiled for retreating from an unwinnable battle. Velis's eyes widened in understanding. "Psychological warfare, sir." "More than that," Quran replied. "A reminder that pride can be a fatal weakness." In the AAS conclave, Quran's avatar projected a live feed directly onto the Telkine flagship's command screen. The calm, tired face of the human ambassador stared down Boros. "You have ordered the bombardment of civilians," Quran said, his voice cutting through the tension. "That is petulance, not strategy. Recall your order, or we will unleash the Hellbore Cascade." A murmur spread through the conclave. The Hellbore Cascade was a whispered legend, an unknown but terrifying weapon of total destruction. Quran explained its nature, a network of hidden drone swarms, cloaked and cold-running, designed not to fight, but to infect. A single drone reaching the enemy homeworld would begin a self-replicating chain reaction, turning the planet's crust into a volatile wasteland. Boros's face paled. The threat was real, a ghost hanging over the fate of his entire people. The officers on his bridge no longer saw a fearless leader. They saw a man who had doomed his fleet and his home. Mutiny hung in the air as Sub-Commander Rek took a step forward, hand near his sidearm, eyes full of pity and contempt. Boros sank into his command throne, defeated. "Signal the fleet," he whispered. "Disengage the bombardment. Power down weapons." The war had shifted. The humans had shown that their avoidance of war was not weakness, but a weapon of terrible power. The silence that followed Overlord Boros's surrender was heavy, but not peaceful. The echoes of the battle hung like a shadow over Heracles 9. The Telkine fleet was trapped, battered, and broken, but the war was not yet won. For the humans, this was just the beginning of a harsh lesson in survival and pragmatism. On the Indomitable's bridge, Ken Corrin stood with his officers, eyes fixed on the fleet's movements. The tension was thick, but his calm presence steadied everyone. "We have forced their hand," Corrin said. "Now we must finish this with precision." Lieutenant Serena tapped her console, pulling up scans of the damaged Telkine ships. "They're desperate. Their fleet cohesion is collapsing, but they still have heavy weapons and fighters ready." Corrin nodded. "Our job is to contain, not to destroy indiscriminately. We avoid war because we know the cost. But we will not hesitate to end this if pushed." Meanwhile, on Heracles 9, Milaf coordinated the colony's defenses with ruthless efficiency. The mining machines, once tools of industry, had become instruments of war. The atmospheric condensers hummed with deadly power, ready to clear the skies and reveal any incoming threats. The survivors of the Canyon massacre had been reinforced with fresh troops from the remaining landing crafts. They pressed forward cautiously, aware now that the planet itself was against them. But the humans did not fight them head-on. Instead, they struck with stealth and patience, using guerrilla tactics honed over decades of survival. Sparrow's ghost fleet continued its shadow war. The small, agile ship struck supply lines, sensor arrays, and command relays with surgical precision. Each attack was a whisper, a flicker, a ghost that left the Telkine scrambling. The enemy's frustration grew, feeding into mistakes that Corrin and his team anticipated. It was a game of attrition, but one played on human terms. Back in the Conclave, the other alien species watched the unfolding drama with growing unease. The Sealan hierarchy, known for their xenophobic isolationism, broke their silence. Ambassador Kurin Sealan's avatar, normally cold and rigid, showed a subtle shift. "We concede we have misjudged the Terran mandate," the Sealan said. "Your strategic restraint is logical. Your final deterrent is absolute. We wish to discuss a mutual defense pact." The assembly buzzed with surprise. For the first time, an ancient and proud race admitted fault and sought alliance with humanity. On the iron resolve, Boros sat defeated but not broken. His mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. He watched the news feeds showing his fleet's disarray, the captured footage of human tactics, and the medical aid given to his wounded by their enemies. It was a lesson in humility he had never imagined. Sub-Lieutenant Brev, once skeptical, found himself changed by what he saw. The warmth of human compassion was a weapon no armor could block. In the quiet of the Indomitable, Corrin received a private message from Kian Kuran. "The beast is back in its cage," Kuran said softly. "But the cage is stronger than ever. We keep the galaxy safe, not by conquest, but by showing that the cost of war is too high." Corrin looked out at the stars beyond the viewports. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but for now, humanity had shown it could fight, not just with weapons, but with will, wisdom, and the cold power of truth. He turned to Serena. "Prepare the diplomatic channels. We have lessons to teach and peace to demand." The war was not over, but the tide had turned. The humans avoided war not out of weakness, but because they understood its true price, and they had the power to end it. The shattered calm after the battle was a fragile thing. Heracles 9's red dust settled slowly, covering scars made by both rock and fire. But the war was far from over, and the quiet on the Indomitable's bridge held a tense weight. Ken Corrin stood with his officers, eyes sharp, mind racing ahead to the next challenge. The Telkine fleet was broken, their pride shattered, their home route severed. Yet their spirit remained, driven by a desperate fury born of defeat and fear. Boros was a leader clinging to honor, blinded by shame and haunted by the sins of his grandfather. His stubborn will threatened to drag his people into ruin. Corrin's voice cut through the tension. "They'll try one last gamble. They know they cannot win, but they will fight to the death." Lieutenant Serena brought up the latest intelligence. Boros is consolidating his forces. We've detected movements toward the colony's main habitation dome. He intends to punish the population for the resistance. Corrin's jaw tightened. Then we must show him what survival truly means. On the dusty mesa, Milafan watched the horizon. The atmospheric condensers had cleared the skies, revealing the looming silhouettes of Telkine warships preparing their final assault. The air was thick with tension, the hum of hidden weapons ready to roar to life. Her comlink crackled. Coordinator Fun, the population domes are under threat. We need authorization to engage full planetary defenses. Mila's voice was calm but resolute. Engage. Let them learn the cost of dishonor. The Telkine bombardment began, bright streaks of plasma cutting the night, each impact a brutal reminder of the stakes. But the humans were ready. The colony's hidden weapons fired back, not with reckless fury, but with measured precision. In the midst of the chaos, the colony defense fleet launched a daring strike. The ghost ships reappeared, striking at the exposed Telkine heavy escorts. Explosions bloomed in space like deadly flowers, the outcome decided by skill and courage rather than sheer force. Back on the Iron Resolve, Boros's face was a mask of rage and despair. His officers whispered of surrender and retreat, but honor bound him to fight until the last breath. On the Indomitable, Kian Kuran's avatar reappeared in the conclave chamber. His voice was cold steel. You speak of honor while ordering your troops to execute the wounded and bomb civilians. You have misjudged us. This is not cowardice, but strategy born of memory and pain. His gaze swept the assembly, piercing the pride of 100 species. We do not seek war, but we will end it swiftly. The Hellbore Cascade is not just a threat. It is a promise. We know how to finish wars unconditionally. The chamber fell silent. The weight of Kuran's words settled like a shadow over every delegate. In a hidden aid station, Sub-Lieutenant Brev watched as humans tended to the wounded, friend and foe alike. The warmth and compassion were weapons far stronger than any blaster. It is not weakness, he murmured, but strength beyond our understanding. The tide was turning. The galaxy was beginning to see humanity's true power, not in weapons or fleets, but in the will to survive and the wisdom to avoid needless destruction. On the Indomitable's bridge, Corrin looked to the stars, knowing the next steps would be harder. The war had changed everything. We fight to survive, he said softly. But we fight to end war itself. The stars above Heracles 9 shone cold and distant, silent witnesses to the final act of a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The Telkine fleet, once a tide of crimson death, was now fractured and defeated. The trapped warships drifted in disarray, their crews' morale shattered, their home out of reach. The battle had pushed both sides to the edge, but the humans held a secret strength beyond weapons, a fierce will to survive tempered by hard-earned wisdom. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Ken Corrin stood still, watching the last flickers of resistance fade from the tactical display. His face was worn by decades of conflict, but his eyes burned with the fire of a soldier who had seen too much to ever forget the true cost of war. The Hellbore Cascade remains on the table, Corrin said quietly. A threat we hope never to use, but one that ensures peace. Lieutenant Serena nodded. The Telkine are surrendering. Communications indicate their willingness to negotiate. Across Heracles 9, the aftermath of battle was raw. The mining colony's once harsh landscape bore scars of rock and fire, but beneath it all was a spirit unbroken. Milafan moved through the settlement, checking on survivors, coordinating repairs, and preparing for the uncertain future. Her comlink buzzed with a message from Ambassador Kian Kuran. The galaxy is watching, his voice said softly. We have shown them the cost of hubris and the strength of pragmatism. In the AAS conclave, the avatars of alien leaders reflected the shock and awe of a galaxy forced to rethink its view of humanity. The Sealan ambassador, once distant and aloof, now spoke of mutual defense and alliance. This is a new era, Quran's avatar declared. One where survival is not measured by conquest or honor, but by the will to protect life and avoid needless destruction. Sub-Lieutenant Brev, once a soldier of the Telkine 7th Fleet, now sat in a human aid station. The bowl of warm nutrient paste in his hands was more than food, it was a symbol of mercy, a weapon of hope that no soldier had taught him to fear. I see now, Brev whispered. They fight not because they seek war, but because they know the price. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Corin turned to his officers. We have fought with honor, yes, but also with hard truth. We must carry this lesson forward. The galaxy would remember this conflict not as a war won by firepower, but as a turning point, a time when the beast of war was caged not by chains, but by the understanding of what it truly costs. The humans had stood their ground, not by destroying worlds, but by showing the terrifying wisdom of survival. The beast was back in its cage. The cage was stronger than ever. And for the first time, the galaxy finally understood that the lock was never meant to keep others out, it was meant to keep the beast in.